Well, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrew Summerich. I'm our Head of Learning here at EdApp Microlearning. And thank you so much for joining us for this session about measuring the performance of your microlearning program. I'm really excited to be sharing this with you today. It's the first time in our series of webinars that we've ever broached this topic. And it seems to be a really popular topic. So we've had a record amount of signups. And really happy today to talk to you about how and best practices, I suppose, for measuring your performance in a microlearning program. So today we're going to talk about our experiences as a vendor, as a provider, and as a platform about our experiences and how clients have used our platform to measure the performance of their learners. And we're also going to share with you some best practice so you can take that information away and either do it yourself or apply it to even your own microlearning platform if you're using a different one. But as I said, we are the EdApp Microlearning team from edapp.com. So really pleased to have everyone on the call today. So let's jump right into it. So as a platform, we're quite big now, and we have quite a fair amount of users across the world. We have around 35,000 lessons being completed every single day on the platform, which is really great because it means we have a lot of data to analyze and a lot of knowledge to share with you all today. Let me just introduce the platform briefly. So edapp.com, feel free to sign up for a free trial. We have a 30-day free trial at the moment that is unlimited users and unlimited lessons. And you're more than welcome to sign up just by going to edapp.com, entering your email address if you'd like to give microlearning a go. We're a mobile-first microlearning platform as well, which means learners are super able to do their lessons on the go. Probably the reason we have so many lessons being completed every day is the fact that it is so easy for learners to complete those lessons. But one important takeaway that we've come across over the years that we've been a platform is that everyone is different, and that's one thing our data shows, is that every program is different and needs change. So in terms of that, working with the program manager from EdApp is a great way of ensuring that your pre and post testing and any metrics that you get are accurate and are tracking the metrics that you'd like to track. Okay, let's continue. So there's essentially three ways that we can measure the performance of microlearning. The first one, the one we'll be mostly discussing today, is by conducting pre and post tests. So these are little tests, little modules that learners can do in about 3 to 5 minutes before their course begins, and again at the end, just to check their knowledge at the end. And then that data is really valuable in showing you retention. And also post-tests with a bit of a time delay are really valuable for showing a long-term retention of knowledge. The second is, of course, conducting embedded surveys within the lesson. And these are really great at getting that user feedback that isn't, it's either free text or it's numerical, but it's really easy to sort of collate that, code it, and then dissect some insights from that as to what can be improved, what needs changing, whether or not microlearning is right for the topic that you're teaching. And the third way is to analyze the data through analytics, just the pure analytics of your program. And that's really a point that underpins the platform, is that we have analytics that can show you deeper insights into, for example, how many learners are getting a particular question right or wrong, how much time a learner is spending on a particular slide. And from that, you can distill some pretty good insights with enough data. So let's start by talking about, excuse me, it's not behaving, my apologies. Let's start by talking about pre and post lesson structure. So we're very often used for pre and post testing across the wide variety of clients, and it's a great way, as I mentioned earlier, of measuring the performance before and after a course. And it's a great way also of being able to provide data to others in your organization as to the effectiveness of microlearning. It's a good way of, I suppose, proving that microlearning is a good path to go down. So as you can see, we've created 3 sections to this course. So we've used our modules feature to segment this course into a pre-test. This is the course content, the knowledge transfer, and then the post-test. Of course, in this example, we've just got one lesson in here, so we fit it all on the screen. But as you can imagine, you'd have a lot more within this knowledge transfer module, and you can even have a few modules within that. And essentially what the pretest and the post-test are trying to do is act as as sort of assessments, if you will, for the course as a whole. So much like you would take a assessment at the end of a year of high school, you would take an assessment at the end of a course in ed. And in terms of the feedback that comes from users for pre and post testing, we found that 96% of users found the layout of the course effective, and we've got some nice free text feedback from clients there. So I really enjoy being able to see my pre-test score. Now I feel like the pre-tests are relevant. It's a very nice new format. It's informative with the information building upon each previous segment while referring to the initial theme. Good to compare pre and post-test scores. So learners actually see a real value in being able to compare their score for the pre-test and the score for the post-test. And you're also able to keep the pre-test score hidden until the post-test is completed and provide that to them at the very end, so they can actually see the effectiveness of the course for themselves, which we find is a really effective way of being able to give learners some significance to their content. And that we find is something that is lacking in traditional e-learning, the ability to have that level of significance embedded within your e-learning. So let's have a look at the structure a bit more expanded. So beginning here on the left, we've got our pretest, and this is formed entirely of questions, of course. And also learners don't know if they have the questions right or wrong. So the point of this is not to teach anything, it's simply just to establish a baseline. In the middle here, we've got our knowledge transfer, which is your regular microlearning course, which we're all sort of familiar with. It's just the content, it's the knowledge transfer. And then on the right, you have, of course, the post-test, which it's not very obvious from here, but the pre and the post-test are actually the same. So it's really important to establish a baseline and then measure against that baseline. And one way you can do that is by simply duplicating that initial pretest. And that's a really easy way of, as I said, having a very scientific example of how learners have improved over time. So let's have a look at what it looks like from a user perspective. So this first stage would be the pretest. And here, this is a client that's GFG Global, who is a sort of a building and construction firm. And this is a product course about PFX, which is some reinforcements. So initially here in the pretest, we have just a free text question where we're asking learners to describe what they understand PFX to be. And they'll enter that response, press OK, I'm done. And then their data will be recorded, and they'll be able to, the administrator will be able to see that in the management portal, export that, and analyze that data later. In the second stage, the user will complete the courseware as per normal. It's just an e-learning course that they complete. As I mentioned, the platform is quite easy. It's 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day. And then they'll, do that for 2 or 3 weeks in this particular program. It was a 3-week program. And then in this third stage, they'll be prompted perhaps by a push notification, perhaps by an email, whatever works best for your particular audience. They'll be prompted to take a post-test. And it will be the same test as they took at the beginning. So we'll ask them to describe what they understand PFX to be. And then an additional stage, which is optional, is a reflection survey. So they're able to rate what they thought of the platform if this is the first go with EdApp. It's a really good way of measuring your employees' impressions of the platform. And often we find that you get little tips from your users and that sort of thing as to how open they are to this mobile learning and that sort of thing. So we get some really good insights just from that additional stage, although it is optional, of course. So another question we get is what should I be asking in my pre and post test and in my survey? So on the left here, we've got an example. Would you recommend this form of learning, microlearning via EdApp, to others? and then they can say strongly disagree or strongly agree, and they can slide that slider along the scale. So that's one of our survey templates. In the middle here, we've got a question saying, did you know the previous question? Did you guess it, or did you work it out? Like, did you go somewhere and look it up? That sort of thing. And that's a really good way of testing the validity of their responses. So if this high amount of people is getting something right, then you can actually check, is it something that they already knew, or is it something that they just guessed and it's a coincidence that a lot of people are getting it right? And then on the right here, this is a clarifying question. So this is a great way of asking, solid knowledge, do they have that or not? You can also use multiple choice templates for asking classifying questions, so like region, age group, that sort of thing. And that's really useful for classing your statistics into various different buckets. So we're going to go into a demo now. And what I'm going to do is just open up my EdApp here. So here we've got a course screen, and I'm going to show you today the new modules feature, which allows you to, makes pre and post testing just that little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is click down here to add a module. And my first module, I'm going to call it Pretest. My second module, I'm going to call course. And then my third module is going to be called post-test. And then it's super simple just to click and drag each lesson. Into the different modules. And as you can see, now these are nice and separated. And in the app, they're going to be segmented for your users. And once a learner is done with the pretest, they can just collapse that module. They don't have to worry about it again, and it's not going to be cluttering up their screen. They never have to think about it again. Now, let's jump into one of these lessons, so the pretest lesson, and look at configuring it to be a pretest. So what are the settings that we need to put on a pretest to make it authentic and make it secure, so there's no cheating involved? So the first thing we're going to do is disable answer feedback. So what this will do is actually hide the takeaway and whether or not the learner got a question correct. So we're going to disable that. We're also going to tick lock after completion. So what this does is once the learner has done the lesson once, marked it as complete and the data has been saved, they won't be able to go into it again, and they'll just be notified. It'll have a little padlock on it saying that they've done it, but they can't access it again. And we've already ticked this, but you can hide the lesson score. So that makes it so that they won't see the score until you untick that box. So once the program has finished, you can untick that box, or you can provide it to them in a report or a certificate or something like that, and see how much they've improved. Now let's just have a look at the lesson content here and jump into it. And I'm going to show you what disabling that answer feedback does. So here we've got a multiple choice template. And we're not actually able to see the takeaway field. So once I finish this slide, once I mark it as done, it just moves on to the next one. And it's really easy for your learners not to be shrouded by those expectations that they have to get everything right, because they're actually going to know what they got right or wrong. Now, a really good idea with the pretest is to add a quick title slide. And we'll put that right at the beginning of the lesson there. And we'll just say pretest. So we can just say to our learners that there is no minimum score and that they can record their knowledge here before they begin. So it's, you're not trying to trick them. You're not trying to make sure they all know something before they begin the course. It's really just establishing a baseline. We'll jump back out into the course now, and I'll show you configuring a post test. So we've got our course here, of course, and then we've got our post test up here. My mistake. So our post-test is just the same as the pre-test. It's got a little title slide here saying you must score at least 80% to pass the test. So let's jump into testing and make sure that that's actually true. We'll tick require a minimum score, and then we can select our minimum score to be 80%. Now we can make it even stricter if we want, and we can say reset the course completion after failing, and say they have 3 attempts, for example. If we want to be really strict, we can say they've only got 1 shot. And then what that's going to do is if they don't get that 80% in the final test and they keep not getting it, it's just going to reset their course completion entirely. And what we find is that sort of weeds out learners who just sort of click next on every slide and never actually read anything and get everything wrong on purpose or just pick random answers. And it's a really good way of catching them out and making sure that learning is actually occurring and that you're not having lazy learners. We can enable answer feedback because we actually want them to know what they're getting right or wrong. You don't have to enable that if you don't want to, if you want to keep it authentic. And you can enable or disable stars. So you can give them rewards for completing their assessment or not. So stars are our in-app currency that go towards prizing within the platform. You can, lock it after completion. So that's actually only going to lock it once they've reached that minimum score. They're not going to be able to go back in and improve on that score. But they're also, they can have those 3 attempts and they're not going to be locked out and not be able to attempt it again. So those 2 settings, the minimum score and the lesson locking after completion, work pretty well in conjunction with each other. Now let's jump into our lesson and I'll show you what I meant with that answer being hidden. So we'll jump into our missing word here. And now what we do when we answer a question and press OK, we're done, we actually do get a pop-up with the correct answer and a little bit of extra context about it. And so that's, going through the lesson and going through the post-test and actually realizing that, oh yeah, you got things right and you've actually learned something. It's a really good way of motivating learners. So we'll save that and then we'll have a look at our analytics and how in-depth you can be with your analytics when it comes to pre and post-testing. So looking at analytics for certain courses is a really good way of getting an insight into what works and what doesn't. In this page here, which is our course progress page, we can easily see what percentage of learners have gotten things correct and what percentage have gotten incorrect. We can also see, which is really interesting, the amount of time it took. So we can see that this slide, it took 14 seconds for people to answer and only 14% of them got it correct, which might indicate to us that, this is taking, although it's only 14 seconds, it is taking a much longer time than these other slides to answer, and most learners are failing it. So maybe that's a question that we should go in and revise, maybe reword it, maybe there's an issue with configuration or something like that. So that's just a little red flag, and you can see that that's color-coded there as well. If a significant amount of learners are getting it incorrect, it's a really easy way of quickly seeing that. We can also see a whole range of things like average time, percentage correct. This one, no one got it right, so maybe we'll go in and revise that question. And you can also see that for each lesson. So these are just regular knowledge transfer lessons, and we can see, 100% of people are getting these ones correct. So these are just little reinforcements that, people are going to get correct. The other thing we can see, and the other method of evaluation, is surveys. So we don't have that much data in this account, my apologies. But what you can do from this screen is jump into a lesson and you can see the different survey responses for each of the courses. I'm going to try one with at least 1 response. My apologies that I didn't actually have any responses in here. So I'm going to hit view responses, and then what we can do is actually export that data as a CSV. And, including the free text survey answers that can also be exported as a CSV, or we can just quickly export a CSV for an entire lesson. And so there's some really good ways of exporting the data and making sense of that in external programs. And I suppose it's a great way of identifying those trends and those influences. So you have a bunch of options when it comes to pre and post testing and also lesson surveys. So I'm just going to quickly jump back into our presentation here. And, let's look at the advantages of pre and post testing. So why should you go in and actually measure the performance of your learners? You know, perhaps you're just running a compliance lesson. You're not really concerned about whether or not your learners are responding well to the information and that sort of thing. Well, it's a really good way of asking what your learners thought, particularly being an e-learning author as opposed to classroom teaching. You really don't get that feedback that often. And it's sometimes you can go years without knowing what people thought of your course. So it's a really good way, pre and post testing is a really good way of asking what your learners thought. You can also get to know the questions and concerns that they have. So if there is something glaringly wrong with your course that you're not 100% aware of, you can be made aware of it much more quickly than otherwise. So instead of them having to send you an email, they can just include it in the survey response, and you'll know about it as soon as you export those survey results, which could be quite often. You can also identify content gaps. So if there's something that your learners would like to learn that they weren't able to learn within the course, then you can identify those gaps in the content. So 3 advantages there, and I'm sure you can think of many more of measuring your performance.